Happy Advent. Advent is my favorite liturgical season for a whole bunch of reasons, but one of them is the richness of the texts that the church gives us during the season of Advent from our scriptures. And for the next 2 weeks, with the exception of the Marian feast, our first reading every day is from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah is sometimes referred to as the fifth gospel because so many of our most treasured images about who God is and who Jesus is. Today we get the gifts of the Holy Spirit come from this part of Isaiah. Um, so many of that comes from this gospel, this text from a prophet from the Hebrew scriptures that it often gets up there with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as one of the more influential texts on how we think about who God is, who Christ is, and who we're called to be. And in today's text, we get this wonderful image of God's holy mountain, the place where God has made everything the way God has always hoped it would be, where there's peace. Yesterday, we got plowshares being, uh, weapons being hammered out into plowshares. Today, gave the image where even the animals are getting along. The wolf's going to be a guest of the lamb, the leopard's going to lie down with the kid. And we get in both of our readings today a lot about children. In Isaiah, we talk about how the calf and the young lion will browse together with a little child to guide them. And then it goes on to say, the baby will play by the cobra's den, the child lay his hand on the adder's lair. All these images of children being safe. And in a world where children are not safe in so many ways, in so many places, what could better signify that God's reign, that things have really been made right, that children are safe not just from malicious humans, but even from the animals that seem to be so dangerous to our world. And in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus also is talking about children. Jesus says he's rejoicing. He sort of spontaneously starts praying in front of his disciples and says, Father, I thank you for you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to the childlike. Now, that should cause a bit of pause to those of us who sometimes think or sometimes thought of as wise and learned, who might have degrees in theology, say, or might be at the top of our careers or the top of our professional associations or status. And there's many of us in Holy Trinity Parish who are kind of the wise and the learned in lots of things, in lots of important ways. So this text calls us to say, well, how do we become childlike to be able to better witness to what God is trying to reveal to us, to show us in this time of Advent? That word childlike is important there. You could translate it as childlike. You could translate revealed it to the little ones. You can translate it as you reveal this to the babies. And we need to think about what's getting, what is it getting at there in that time and place. So in our world, when we think childlike, we often think about innocence. We often, there's a sort of a cuteness to children. Yes, and for the record, I'm not denying that. There's a sort of innocence and ability to see the world in a fresh way. For the next 4 weeks, you're going to be bombarded with advertisements that are trying to sell you something based on looking at Christmas with a child's eyes. And there's something to that innocence in here, but there's something more important. This isn't just about children as innocent, this is about children as vulnerable. This is about being childlike because they're small, they're vulnerable, they're dependent. Think of a baby's dependence upon its parent. Think about our children's dependence upon us to feed them, to clothe them, to comfort them, to wipe their face when they get dirty, to put a band-aid on when they get hurt. How do we become like that? Or why does Jesus think it's a good thing that God is revealing something to the childlike more than to the wise ones, to the big ones, to the elite? It's not about just trying to reclaim lost innocence, because that doesn't work anyway. It's about trying to get in touch with our own limitations, our own smallness, our own vulnerability. And there are some of us in our Holy Trinity community who already know that well. But there are also many of us in our Holy Trinity community who aren't vulnerable that much in many parts of our life. We've got a job, we've got a house, we've got a mortgage, we've got a degree from a college or university. How do we get in touch with the vulnerability that is the key to unlocking what God is trying to show us? Well, one way is through closeness. Pope Francis talks about how we all need to have our pastors have the smell of the sheep. He talks about a culture of encounter where we get close to people who are vulnerable. We're going to be doing lots of great work that's charity during this time of Advent and Christmas. And some of that's going to be through direct financial support, through writing a check, through buying a present for our Christmas trees. But some of it needs to be through being close. And I'm saying this to me and not just like I've figured this out. But how do we figure out during these 4 weeks to get close to the people who are vulnerable, who are childlike, who are the little ones in our world, because they are vulnerable to all of the forces that are trying to destroy the world? They're the ones for whom the gospel is the most good news. They're the ones who this image of a mountain where the animals are even peaceful now, where tomorrow we see where you never run out of food. That's what Isaiah is getting at. And if we already have enough food and feel pretty peaceful, we need to enter into deeper solidarity, deeper closeness with those who don't have that experience. So as you're walking down the street and see somebody asking you for money, how are you going to be present to them? As you're working in your field and working in your office or going to school and see someone who is lonely, friendless, annoying, how are you going to be making the space to be vulnerable and close to them? And again, I'm saying this not because I figured it out, but I'm saying this because this seems to be how God reveals things, that God is revealing stuff through those who are small, not those of us who think that we're big. The deep irony is that those who are most vulnerable and dependent upon God are a better guide for looking to see where God is revealing his new world than those of us who think we've already got it down pat. So as we continue in this Advent, as we continue reading Isaiah, if we really want to welcome the world that God is changing, the world that turns everything upside down so that those who are most vulnerable are now free and safe, how are you going to find ways to be closer to those who are already vulnerable so that you can rejoice with them as one of the small ones, as one of God's babies, as one of God's children? Have a wonderful Advent.